Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Finally coming off being sick, so I'm excited to get you guys some awesome content again. It's been a little bit tough. I'm still a little bit nasally, so please bear with me. But we're gonna get into this red-yellow Frieza deck profile. So there's actually a lot of different ways you can play this deck, which I find really fascinating and really cool. You can go mono red. It's more of just like strict Frieza army, kind of Frieza spaceship spam, but not a lot of room for tech options. Then you have the very popular red-blue deck, which is actually very defensive. It's a very turtley deck that actually has some really good offensive plays as well, because you're playing Senzu Bean for offensive and defensive untapping. That does come into a bit of a problem with Borgos, although the deck can somewhat remove that card in the main deck. But really, you play that deck in a storm format and like to be a little bit more explosive. Then you have the red-yellow version of the deck, which is my personal favorite. A lot of players that play red-blue do side into red-yellow. I think with the way the format's going to shape up, especially post-banlist with Storm seeing a decrease in power, I think that red-yellow is going to be one of the better ways to go about the deck. Red-blue will still be very explosive and very strong, but I think red-yellow will be a lot more viable coming into the post-banlist format. So right before we get into the deck profile, if you guys are new to the channel, hitting that sub button would be awesome of you guys. Get a lot of that great DBS content you guys know and love by subbing to the channel. If you guys are interested in joining a Dragon Ball Super Discord, we do have one in the description down below. We just talk about everything Dragon Ball Super related, so definitely get in touch with that. And if you guys are longtime fans of the channel, definitely consider supporting me on Patreon. It really just helps us keep bringing you guys this content, and the articles have been flowing lately. So we're just talking a lot about game theory and matchup knowledge lately, so definitely check that out. So with that being said, we'll get into this deck profile. So new Frieza leader out of Clash of Fates, and I think it's so cool how pretty much all the Clash of Fates leaders are very playable and almost like borderline meta relevant. I mean, Frieza is definitely proven to be the most meta relevant leader, but don't sleep on that Green Goku or that Bardock's crew. The Namekian leader is a little bit tougher to make relatively good, but with that being said, you know, 3 out of 4 is still pretty solid. So what the leader does, if you don't know, is once per turn you can take a life, and then you can check the top 2 cards of your deck. If you hit a red Frieza army, you can add it to your hand, put the other any remaining cards at the bottom of the deck. So he has the very unique awakening skill of untapping 1 energy and drawing 1 card. We're starting to see that on more and more leaders, but it's still pretty unique as far as we're concerned now. And then Frieza the Metamorphic Threat. He's a 15k, but it's super duper easy to actually get him to like 30k in this deck. So attack, draw a card, and activate main. You can basically kill one of your Frieza army cards on the board and discard a card, so you can give him a plus 5k for 2 turns, for your turn and until the end of your opponent's turn. So essentially you can do that, you know, before you start swinging with him to make him a 20k, and there's other ways to boost him up higher. And so basically on the front side, he's pretty plus. He's basically a +2 every turn as long as you hit a red Frieza army target. On the back side, he's kind of like a -2, but we play some cards in the deck to mitigate that -2. But that Senzu Bean effect is incredibly relevant, especially for the format moving forward. So we'll get into the main deck. So we've got 4 overwhelms. We've got 2 Supreme Kai of Time, Light's Guide, and 2 Scientist Fu. Once you get to like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, it's very easy to overwhelm on all 3 of those turns consecutively. Supreme Kai being a cheaper overwhelm target, I mean, just your leader effect on the backside gets you 2 cards of the way there. So that's one of the other ways you can also get your leader to a 25k, almost 30k base. So with your leader effect on the backside and then dropping a Supreme Kai, you get him up to 25. And then you have the 1-drop Frieza to bump him up to 5k. Scientist Fu, real quick, just since you're not playing red-blue, you don't have the super cheap aggressive plays that the red-blue variant offers with Senzu Bean, but Scientist Fu is still one of the best 1 energy 25k double strikers in the game, drawing you 2 cards, adding up to your advantage. I mentioned a little bit the Frieza Overture to Battle. That's your 1-drop swap. This is a swap deck, as many of you do know, and this card is one of the ways that, you know, combined with your own leader's effect, combined with Supreme Kai, Light Guide, and then the Frieza 1-drop swap, that is, you know, 3 5k boosts to your leader. That's a 30k swing without ever even comboing, and we all know that swinging tall in this game is really good. Then we do play Strike Force Jace. So this is your red super combo. It is searchable off your leader, so anytime you have some added searchability with your super combo, it's really plus. Then we have 4 Evolutionary Process Frieza. This is your 2-drop swap. This is where the deck gets a little bit aggressive. This, and I'll skip to it right now, the Frieza Storm of Blows. So Frieza Storm of Blows is a 3-drop, is a swap, and it has barrier, and you can go into it for 1 energy from the Evolutionary Process Frieza. So when you go into the Frieza Storm of Blows, you come in, you can pop anything 20k or less, and it's a 15k swinger. So not quite as aggressive as, like, let's say 1-2 swap, the traditional yellow version, but what you can do is you can bring the 1-drop into play, give your leader 5k, so that's a 15k leader swing. Then you're going to go for free into the 2-drop 15k. So the first time you swap into the 2-drop, you're not really going to swing with it, but later turns when you're trying to go aggro on the opponent, it's a pretty much 1 energy 15k body, and that 1 energy also gave your leader a 5k, and then for an additional energy you get another 15k leader swing and a basically a pop of almost any battle card on the board. So that, I say that all to say that for 2 red energy you essentially get 3 15k attackers, which is not as cheap as 1-2 swap, getting 2 15k attackers for 1 energy. There's a bit of a difference there, also because of how early in the game it can happen, but it's still very, very cheap and very, very pressuring, especially in the later parts of the game. And this is a control deck, so this deck is built to play in the mid game, and that type of attacking in the mid game, a lot of decks can't handle it. So 3 Frieza Spaceship. This is a card that I play in my yellow variant. I know a lot of blue-red variants don't play it, and they also don't really side into it, even if they side into yellow. But this deck is built to play a longer controlling game, and there's a lot of good 2-drops in this deck you want to get out onto the board with the Spaceship, and it just generates you more pluses over time. You know, this deck isn't like red-blue, where it's looking to win on like turn 3. This is more like turn 4, turn 5 territory. So you're looking to play your Frieza Spaceship on 2 if you don't have access to like your swap plays, or if you don't need to bring in Storm of Blows to pop a guy. Spaceship is going to set you up a board, and it's going to draw you cards over the course of the game. So very, very valuable. You can also loop that with your Evolutionary Process Frieza. You can swap it back. You can swap into the 3-drop for 1, and then Spaceship at the end of the turn will let you play your Process Frieza. So you can, as long as you have the Process Frieza, you can almost always have a target for Spaceship on board, which is pretty cool. Then we do have 2 Hidden Power East Supreme Kai. I opt to play this over Unbreakable because I feel like in a deck like this, you have better offensive capabilities rather than defensive capabilities. Most often, you're just going to leave a yellow up for your defensive, you know, Cold Liliths or Nimbuses. So you want that Hidden Power East Supreme Kai in there just as a finisher, you know, almost like a win con for when, you know, you pressure them low on life. You want to be able to win the game that way. And then we have Dodoria the Expendable. So this is a card I'm testing out, and I've actually been liking it a lot lately. So a lot of people have come to the understanding that blockers give Gogeta 7 a really rough time, and that is pretty true. Also, any deck that can play Swap is going to give Gogeta a hard time. Think about what I said before. 2 red energy, you've got 3 15k attackers. That's a lot of damage for a Shenron leader to combo out of, especially when most Shenron decks don't awaken until turn 3. You're most likely going to get those 3 attacks in before your opponent's leader is awakened. So Dodoria, kind of bouncing off of that, is a really good Spaceship target. You play it down for free and draw a card, and it forces your opponent to either not kill you with the Gogeta 7, especially if you establish multiple, or it forces them to Gogeta 5 you. And since we play Cold Bloodless in this deck, we play the answer to Gogeta 5, making it less effective. And like I said, with the falling in power of Storm, of course, the power of Gogeta 7 is going to rise. This is not like, you know, the sky's falling type of thing. That's just pretty much a blatant fact that power levels will fall and rise, you know, as majorly or slightly as it might be. But Dodoria is a good tech card to kind of force the Gogeta players into doing something they don't necessarily want to do. And when the Dodoria dies, you can bring something else into play. So you can even use that offensively, right? So let's say you have a Spaceship, you bring a Dodoria into play for free. Let's say the Dodoria lives, you don't use it to block or anything like that. On the following turn, you can swing with it, maybe combo into it, maybe not. You can use your leader effect to KO the Dodoria, and then you can bring in any of your other guys into the battlefield. I kind of skipped over Zarbon. I'll head back to him right now. Zarbon is like one of the best cards in the deck, honestly. He comes out off the Spaceship, or you can just hardcast him for 2. He's a 2-drop 15k, which is a really good stat to hit because by turn 2, it's hard for your opponent to move it off the board. And a lot of times, your opponent's going to resist trying to get this guy off the board, especially by KOing it, because oftentimes it's going to mean they lose one of their own battle cards if they do that. And then, like I mentioned before, if you use your leader's backside effect and you crack Zarbon or you pop Zarbon, you draw a card back off that neg. So essentially you replace the Zarbon, and then you can decrease one of your opponent's battle cards by 15k. So essentially you're not really losing anything on the exchange. You're basically bumping your leader by 5k for free if you manage to KO a battle card with Zarbon. And again, very, very good Spaceship target. We talked about Storm of Blows. Body Change Ginyu, one of the best red cards in the game, period. I mean, this card is absolutely nuts. The fact that it adds consistency to your leader's front side effect is really good. But anytime you need to just cast down a 3-drop removal, and sometimes even better than removal, you take the card. It just gets really, really nuts from there. You gain some really powerful effects because those cards come to your board with their full effects. I mean, if you take a Cost Vegeta or a Shenron Figure of Majesty, your turn, the tempo swing there could just be so insane. Then we have 4 Final Showdown Frieza, 4 just to max out consistency. I think you can get away with playing 3, but realistically, I want to hit off of my leader effect as much as possible, and there's not really many changes I would make to this. except for maybe a few minor tech changes depending on how the format shapes up. But for right now, I really like this build, and I really want to see this Final Showdown Frieza on 3, because in this deck, on turn 3, you can have your Final Showdown Frieza setup with a yellow for a Cold Bloodlust. So turn 3, 2 negates essentially, almost looking like a Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But no, this is really the epitome of a control deck. You have a Final Showdown Frieza that can just negate anything coming into play. It ignores the flex because it's not a counterplay, and having a Cold Bloodlust ready next to that is really powerful. A lot of people don't know this, so I'm going to mention it here about Final Showdown Frieza. Because of the way autos work in this game, you essentially have to use Final Showdown Frieza on the first card your opponent plays in a turn, or you lose it. Because even though it's an auto once per turn and it's read like an optional effect, your auto goes into pending as soon as your opponent plays down a guy. That is not an optional thing. Autos always go into pending when their conditions are met, and if you don't use that auto there, you do lose it. So they can bait around it. However, for Gogeta, it can be very hard to do that, especially if you're clearing their Shenron Figure of Majesties. So that should not necessarily be a problem. If you're playing this deck properly, this should be a very good answer to Gogeta 7. So definitely keep that in mind. The one Frieza Armory board, and kind of just a flex on them. You really don't need this card, and it's really only good in very slow matchups, like maybe Janemba, but you don't play this card a whole lot. You can definitely cut this for like maybe another yellow card just to up your yellow count, even though 10 yellow is totally fine. But if you have the card, I would play it because it looks really cool, and it actually has a really bonkers effect if you manage to get it off. I mean, if the game is going along and you see the play, you play for it. It's pretty solid. 4 Cold Bloodlust, 4 Flying Nimbus, 2 Frieza Biding His Time. Our 10 card yellow package, Cold Bloodlust and Nimbus for that control aspect. Bloodlust negating effects, Nimbus you're limiting how many attacks your opponent get per turn. And the presence of Nimbus in the deck actually does give us an answer to Gogeta 7 outside of like Final Showdown Frieza or like Dodoria having to make them play around it. Flying Nimbus, if you draw back into it off of the Gogeta 7 and you're at 4 life, or if you have a blocker on board, you're going to live that turn because they only can swing with the Gogeta one more time. And as long as you're not going to lose to 3 damage, you're not going to lose that turn. So this deck is definitely more equipped to play against a deck like Gogeta 7. In the controlling aspect, you're really playing for the Final Showdown Frieza, and you're playing for the Flying Nimbus. The 2 Frieza Biding His Time, it's just to fill up the yellow count, and it can get can rest down pesky, striving to be the best on Goku's. It's not the most detrimental card to this deck, but when you are playing against like a Gogeta deck or anything you want to go aggro against, that card can get in the way of like your Process Frieza swinging, and that is a 1-drop 15k swing essentially. So you want to make sure you're able to swing with that. So you bring your Frieza Biding His Time down, and you rest the striving, and then you clear it from there. So guys, this is the deck profile that I've been playing for Red Yellow Frieza. Like I said before, personally enjoy the yellow variant. I was messing around with the Ginyu package main deck, but I found that they're just too small. They're way too small at 10k. They're really good against Shenron when you get to go first, especially. They're okay when you go second because you get a lot of 10k attacks off, but not worth it, especially when your opponent awakens, because you're having to waste cards to kind of combo into them and deal damage. So I've ended up cutting them, and I found that this deck is really good, really strong. Recommend you try it out. So with that being said, leave any comments on the deck down below in the comment. Definitely want to know what you guys think about it. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Joey. This is Crosswell TCG, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Hey, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another vid. Hang on. This is the end card, not a... Ah, screw it. I'm gonna play some Pokemon. See ya!